Hi everyone, welcome to Introduction to Redshift for 3ds Studio Max. In this video we are gonna talk about the different kind of lights and their settings, and at the end we are gonna talk a bit about the GI, Global Illumination in Redshift. We can find the Redshift lights in the Create panel lights, and if you just choose the Redshift, let's start with the Doom light and bringing up our IPR window. You can bring it by going to the render setup, output, and render view, or we can also put it in our layout by going to the configure viewports and choosing your layout and then adding the redshift. And now we have both of them next to each other. So let's start our progressive rendering. Now let's check the settings. We have on or off as usual for turning off and turning on the lights. About the samples I will gonna talk at the end of the video. And now at the moment the light is just using a normal white color as this tint color. You can change it, you can make it red or blue or anything, and here you can just assign the texture, HDR map, or anything that you have. So let's assign our texture. You can adjust the gamma here, automatic or override, or you can just bring it, and as you can see very fast it's loading the texture in the memory and rendering it. So here you can just check the type of the texture. You can use the spherical or any other kind of the HDR map that you're using. You can just use the flip and then you can just use the gamma override here. If you are using the HDR map and any file with the .exr, .hdri, they are using linear workflow, so they are normally 1. The gamma is 1, but here you can also, if you're using any sRGB texture, you can just change it here and you can just keep it as it is. This adjust part is for playing with the map itself. So whatever you change here, you can increase the exposure or decrease it. It's gonna play with the texture value itself. So you can also play with the hue and saturation. And next is the preview tab section. And so here, let me hide the background. As you can see, we can see also the texture in the background. It's pixelated because it's a low resolution. You can increase the resolution more and it's gonna fix that pixelation here, but it's not affecting in the render. As you can see, if I put it even in 512, which here is totally big pixels, here it's not affecting the render. Or you can just turn it off in the viewport, so you are not gonna see it anymore. And same for exposure offset, it's just for the preview. And if you just assign a image sequence, which if you just, when you're loading your texture, if you just choose a texture and if it's a sequence, you can just enable it, and then when you are loading it, you will have the option to play a start frame, playback rate, and the others. So intensity, as I said, the tint is the color that you can apply as a light color when you don't have the texture. When you have texture, you can just add it to that texture, so you're somehow tinting that HDR map. Also, we have the intensity, which it's increasing and or decreasing the intensity of the doom light. So it's a bit look like the exposure, value. I mean, playing with the exposure value, but here you are just increasing or decreasing the intensity of light, which is including all those HDR values. So next is the ray contribution. So affects diffuse or affects the specular. So by enabling or disabling, you can just control your light behavior. So now it's just affecting on the specular. You don't see any diffuse lighting. And same here, you don't see any effects on the specular or reflection. It's just on the diffuse. And also you can just decrease it as much as you want or keep it as the way that you want. And same for a scatter. Later, I mean, we will talk about the volumetrics. So shadow, enable or disabling it. Transparency, which means that at the moment, as you can see, it's totally normal black shadow. But if you just increase it to 1, you will lose it. Actually, you're just increasing or decreasing the darkness of your shadow. And also you can just include or exclude any object if you want in the scene by just selecting and adding to the list you want to exclude or include. Let's say exclude. Yeah. So you have to just reload the Redshift, otherwise it's not gonna work. So as you can see, we just disable lighting on the model, and you can just bring it back and reload it. Next, we have the volume that I'm gonna talk about this at the end of the video. Then photon, it's for applying K6 to the scene. Again, we will talk about this later. Environment, at the moment, it's enabled, but because we are using that mesh as a background, we couldn't see it. So it's applied as a background for us. But if you just check the alpha channel, you will see that it's pure white. It means that the HDR map is taking the whole alpha. But if we just want to remove it and just have the alpha of the mesh, so this is what we have. And if you just again put it 1, you will have it just like before. Next is our backplate. So if you just want to assign any different kind of texture for your backplate, you can just enable it. Now we don't assign anything. We didn't assign anything, so we just have black. But if you assign any kind of texture, and then it if it's .exr or .hdrr, so it's gonna be linear, so you don't need to change this gamma. You can just keep it 1. But if it's JPEG or PNG or anything that it's a different kind of sRGB profile, you have to just enable that. And you can just play with the exposure hue saturation of that photo here that you applied for the backplate. Now let's check the other lights that we have. I will bring the environment, and I'm gonna just pause the progressive render, and I'm gonna turn off the light, and let's go and check the others. So here we have the physical lights that it's including the all point, spot, and directional. So by putting one of them, you can just also access 2 others. So let's just put 1 here. Okay, now let's turn on our progressive render, and you can just lock the camera that we are seeing through that here. And now here you can just go to perspective, and then you can just have your render here through the camera and just check the light setting. So here let me just decrease it a bit, and also let me just put it back again a bit. So what we have here, again, on and off. So by turn it on or off the light. So here you can just choose any one of these one area that it's gonna be like. At the moment it's rectangle, so you can choose the disc shape here. You can just choose the spherical. You can choose any kind of these ones. I'm gonna explain mesh when I get to that. So you can just change the length and width of the light here, the rectangle one. So for each of these ones, you have the option to change. As you can see here, for disk, you can just change the width of that. So next we have the intensity. You can just choose between the color, which is like before, or you can just change it with the temperature, Kelvin. So if you just go under 6500, it's gonna be warm, and if you go higher than that, it's gonna be cold. And pure white is 6500. Then we have the unit type. You can choose between any of them. The general, it's the image, and then you can just choose between the luminance or the radiant power. It's totally up to you. We have intensity, just like the other lights. Increase or decrease the lighting power. And we have the ray contribution, again the affecting the diffuse or specular. And also we have the matte shadow illumination, which is when you are using the shadow catcher shader for observing just the shadow of your light. It's gonna light up those shadows. Also, you can just play with the amount of that diffuse lighting. We have the decay. So normally, physically true is this inverse square, but it's totally up to you. You can just cancel it. It's totally without any decay, or you can just make it linear and you can just put it manually, that the start and the stop of that effect. You can just play with these numbers, but I totally suggest you to just keep this at default, which is the correct one. We have the area section, which is it's just available when you are using the light type area. So visible or invisible, the mesh light, and then you have the bidirectional, which is gonna light the scene from the other side. Then we have the normalized intensity, which is gonna lock and normalize the surface of the light mesh. So by increasing or decreasing it, it's not gonna affect on the intensity of light. It's just gonna affect the sharpness of the shadow. If you just make it very small, you're gonna have the sharper shadows, but if you're gonna make it just big, it's gonna make a very soft shadow. So let's keep it like that. If you don't use this option, by increasing or decreasing the size of the light, you will have the more or less intensity. Then you can, as I said, you can just choose between the shape of your light, and also you have this option for using a custom shape as a light. So if you just come here and if you just make a sphere and bring it up, and then if you just introduce and pick it, so now you have the light which is taking the shape of that mesh that you introduced, but you have to just disable it in the render, otherwise you will see it, because if you just try to delete this sphere, your light also is gone. So keep in mind. Next is the samples. Again, I'm gonna talk about this at the end of the video. Next, and that shadow, again that transparency as we talked in the Doom light. And again the exclude include. Volume, again same, these are the common section in each light. Photon. So now let's check the other type of the physical light. We have the point, which is gonna be a small point in the scene, which is gonna make the light. It's not you cannot change the size of it, it's fixed. You can just play with the color, temperature, and the intensity. You can just increase or decrease it. And again, same settings. And just in the shadow section, you have this softness. So if you just increase it, you will have the more soft shadow, just like the area light. And but if you just put it 0, you will just have totally sharp. And then again samples. And this option, softness, affects the gobo. It's gonna somehow simulate just like a area light. If you just enable it and then increase the softness, it's gonna try to simulate that. And again, volume and photon and the other common tabs. So next we have the spot, which again almost all the tabs are same. And as you can see, automatically it's gonna enable and disable those tabs that you can use or you don't. Here we can change the cone angle. So it's 60, we can make it 90. As you can see, it's gonna affect your light. And the fall off, we can have the totally sharp or soft edges about around your cone light. And this one, we just keep your, if you just deselect the light, still you are gonna see the cone shape. But if you just disable it and you just deselect your light, it's gonna be gone. And again, shadow, same like before. You can just play with it how you want. You want the sharp shadow or just want the very smooth. And then we have the directional, which is something like sun. It's the position of the light, it's not important, just the rotation of the light is important. Just let's check the other lights that we have. Let me delete this one. So we have the IES lights, which mostly we use it in the architecture projects. And you can just, by clicking in the scene, you can just put that light. And normally they don't have any power at the beginning. Even if you just 500, it's not gonna affect, because you have to load a profile in it. And you can just, there are lots of profile out there, you can just download free. It's the IES format, .ies. And when you just load it, now you see the icon is changed, and now you have the light. So if I just decrease it to 100 again, or less, so you can see we have the light. And they are famous because of the effect that they're making when you put them in the scene. It just for simulating the halogens, you can use them. So again, they have the same options like the color. You can just choose the color, anything you want, and again you can just choose the Kelvin temperature by increasing and decreasing, and same for ray contribution and shadow, again all same. Next we have the portal, which is the by themselves they don't make any lights. These ones, as you can see, they are not affecting, but if just let me delete this one and let me enable our doom light. So you see we have again our doom light, and if I just put this light on top of our model, and if I just increase the intensity, you see it's what's doing, it's just taking the light information from the doom light and just pass it through itself, and you can just use it for those scenes, situations that you have the interiors and you want to bring more light from your doom light or sun that you put outside. So because this is very useful and helpful for getting rid of the extra noises and also improving the render time. So next we have the Redshift Sun, which is totally clear. What is this? And you just put it in scene and the rotation, and so by putting the sun you have this option to add the redshift physical sky. So when you push this button and you have to refresh it, as you can see you got this blue tint, and it's because it's adding this environment map, daylight environment map. So that's why you have this. If I just turn it off and reload it, you see it's again. So we have the intensity multiplier, we have the turbidity, and the ozone. You can just play with them to have a different kind of color theme in the sky. And same shadow, for softness you can just increase it to have totally soft shadow and samples. And again volume contribution, ray contribution, and the K6 all same. So yeah, this is all about the lighting that we have in the Redshift, which is very simple and very effective. You can just make all the lighting situation with these simple and useful lights. So now let's talk about the GI a bit. So I'm gonna delete the sun, and also I'm gonna disable that environment. So yeah, we don't have any light, and let me get rid of this extra stuff in the scene. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the GI, and then we're gonna talk about the sampling, light samplings. So let me bring these lights that I already put in the scene. So if I just turn this one on, yes. So as you can see, at the moment we don't have any GI in the scene. This part of the model is totally black because we don't have any GI. So for enabling the GI, you can just go to the GI tab. You can enable the GI by choosing the brute force for both of the primary and secondary GI engine. when you are in the IPR mode, the Redshift is automatically using the brute force for rendering because it's very fast and it's very responsive. So you see, it's that fast that even you couldn't understand how it's changed. So if I just put it in the bucket mode, and if I just turn them off, you see the difference. So let's turn on the GI. As you can see, we have more light in this area. So yeah, let's go back to our progressive. So if I just turn on the other lights also, yeah, you can see how fast it's responding to the lights, and you can see your final result very fast. In Redshift, we have different kind of the GI engines that we can use. For primary, we have the photon map, which is mostly useful for the effects like K6, and it's not very common for using in the big scenes because it's a bit heavy calculation. So you can use instead the radiance cache, and if I just choose it now, it's not going to affect here because at the moment we are using the IPR. So if I just turn off the IPR and just if I also choose the second GI engine to the radiance point cloud, which is very helpful when you are using the primary engine as a radiance cache or other these three. It's helping a lot to make a faster calculation. So now if I just try to render it in a bucket mode, okay, it's just changed. See, there was a pre-calculation scene, and then we got the render. It's faster a bit than brute force and with much less noise. It's totally up to you to choose for each scene how to use it. So yeah, as you can see, it's just taking much longer than the brute force for calculating that pre-pass. So next, let's talk about the sampling, how we can sample our lights and get less noise out of them. So I'm gonna put them in I will turn off the GI, and let's start one by one. We can also bring the light lister, which it comes with the Redshift. You can just assign it by going to the customize interface, and if you just go to Redshift at the here, you can see you can just see this Redshift light list. You can just put it anywhere you want or any menu. So I'm gonna turn off all of them and I'm gonna start one by one. So we will turn on our progressive, and we are gonna just turn on the bucket mode because in the progressive mode you cannot adjust the sampling. It's just the global sampling and it's not gonna affect the true sampling. And let's just see in the scene which light we can start with. Okay, let's start with this one, which gonna definitely make lots of noise. So I'm gonna turn it on, and as you can see, we have quite lots of noise here. So as I said, you have to be in the bucket mode for adjusting your sampling. So we will start by increasing the sample. See, it's getting better, better, better. And yeah, I think it's smooth enough. And also don't forget that when anytime that you want to start optimizing and doing your sampling, I normally prefer to put them the min and max at 1 for adjusting all the secondary sampling, and then at the end when I get the smooth result from the lights and the reflections, those samples, I'm gonna come to fix it for anti-aliasing and the depth of field for those samples. So now we have a nice clean result for this light. So let's introduce the other light and turn off this one first and then turn on this one. As you can see, again, nice noise. So let's start with 128. Good, let's do it 256. That's good. And the next light is this one. Again, we have quite lots of noise, and now we don't have. And these lights, the spotlights, before that I forgot to turn off this one, and now we have this. And as you can see, I just exclude the include these spotlights just to affect on the sculpture, so we don't see the shadow on the ground. So we don't need to adjust that much, but in case I don't want to have any kind of tiny noise on the sculpture itself, so I already increased the sample to 128 with the softness of 20, so it's giving the good smooth result. So the other thing that I told you I'm gonna explain at the end of the video is that volume part. So now we just want to have that kind of volumetric effect on this spotlight. So for that, if you just open the environment and effects, and if you just go to the atmosphere and add the redshift volume scattering, so we have the effect here. The only thing which is left is to make this light to understand that environment effect by going to the volume, and by increasing this you are introducing that volumetric effect. So as you can see, let me just increase it. You see it's very noisy, so for getting rid of that noise you can just increase this 128. I think enough, or we can just make it for being sure. So as you can see, we have a nice volumetric effect, and we get rid of those noise by increasing the sample, and also this contribution for having those volumetric affected by lights, you have to increase these ones. So yeah, I mean, this is it for this introduction to the lighting in Redshift. Thank you for watching.